Start us off, Carter.
Stereotypical Barbie, quote unquote Barbie, and fellow dolls reside in Barbie Land, a matriarchal society populated by different versions of Barbies, Kens, and a group of discontinued models who are treated like outcasts due to their unconventional traits. While the Kens spend their days playing at the beach, considering it their profession, the Barbies hold prestigious jobs in science, politics, media, and so on. Beach Ken, quote unquote Ken, is only happy when he is with Barbie and seeks a closer relationship, but she rebuffs him in favor of other activities and female friendships. One evening at a dance party, Barbie is suddenly stricken with worries about mortality. Overnight, she develops bad breath, cellulite, and flat feet. Oof, same sister. Disrupting her usual routines the next day. She seeks out Weird Barbie, a disfigured doll, who tells her she must find the child playing with her in the real world to cure her afflictions. Ken stows away in the convertible to join her, to which Barbie reluctantly agrees. Arriving at Venice Beach, punches a man for groping her, leading to her and Ken's brief arrest. Alarmed by the present, Mattel's CEO orders their recapture. Barbie tracks down her owner, a teenage girl named Sasha, who criticizes her for encouraging unrealistic beauty standards. Distraught, Barbie discovers that Gloria, a Mattel employee and Sasha's mother, inadvertently caused her existential crisis after Gloria began playing with Sasha's old Barbie toys in a similar state. Mattel attempts to put Barbie in a toy box for manufacturing, but she escapes with Gloria and Sasha's help, and the three travel to Barbie Land with Mattel executives in pursuit. Don't worry, there's only a little more left of this. Meanwhile, Ken learns about the patriarchy and feels respected for the first time. Returning to Barbie Land before Barbie does, he persuades the other Kens to take over, and the Barbies are indoctrinated into submissive roles such as agreeable girlfriends, housewives, and maids. Barbie arrives and fails to convince everyone to return to the way things were. She becomes depressed, but Gloria gives her a speech about society's conflicting expectations for women, restoring Barbie's self-confidence. With assistance of Sasha, Weird Barbie, Alan, and the discontinued dolls, Gloria's speech deprograms the Barbies from their indoctrination. They then manipulate the Kens into fighting amongst themselves, distracting them from enshrining male superiority into Barbie Land's constitution, and the Barbies regain power. You know, reading this out loud, this plot is really fucking nuts, huh? Having now experienced systemic oppression for themselves, the Barbies resolve to rectify the faults of the previous society, emphasizing better treatment of Kens and all the outcasts. Barbie and Ken apologize to each other, acknowledging their mistakes. Ken bemoans his lack of purpose without Barbie, so she encourages him to find his own autonomous identity. Barbie, who remains unsure of her own identity, meets with the spirit of Ruth Handler, Mattel co-founder and creator of the Barbie doll, who explains that Barbie's story has no set ending and her ever-evolving history surpasses her roots. Barbie decides to become human and return to the real world, and is bidden goodbye by the Barbies, Ken, and Mattel executives. Sometime later, Gloria, her husband, and Sasha take Barbie, now going by the name Barbara Handler, to her first gynecologist appointment. And that is our first episode of Carter Reads the Wikipedia page to various Oscar nominated films, so you can pretend you've seen them before the Academy Awards occur. But actually, this is Carter and Kevin Explain Football. Carter here.
I'm Kevin, and I'm not against the idea of you reading Wikipedia pages.
You know, it really is just like, it's very, when it's popping and the vibes are on, you kind of just nod your head. But when you read it out loud, you're like, man, this a lot's happening. We don't talk enough about how Ruth Handler shows up. Lady who was in actual prison for tax fraud, like actual human woman who existed in real life, who is honestly more famous at this point for like committing a lot of crimes and going to jail. But anyway, we are actually here to talk football. We are at the divisional destination, as Kevin calls it.
Yes.
This is the Elite Eight, the last 8 teams of the NFL season. We had some highs, we had some lows, we had some almost upsets. We didn't really have any meaningful upsets, and we will get to that. And we had, honestly, a pretty solid week of football, all things considered. Shall we get into it?
We shall.
So, first things first, Lamar's big game. And we will talk about the Houston Texans at the end of this as we bid adieu to our summer children as they head into literal, actual summer. But yes, so this game, honestly, this game kind of went to script in terms of like the best team in the league, awful lot of rest going up against the young, scrappy, hungry team in terms of like the Texans threw every single haymaker they had in the first half. The Ravens looked a little sloppy. They looked a little off. They gave up a punt return. And you could just hear that quiet little voice of like, is a narrative forming? Is a narrative forming? Is the discourse going to go crazy? But unfortunately for the Texans, the Ravens did kind of wake up in the second half. make some big adjustments in terms of pressuring Stroud. It's truly snuffing out the run game completely. And Lamar Jackson had what is his best playoff performance, honestly, by a country mile. He was 16 of 22 for 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had carried the ball for 11 times for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, and simply just had like utter and complete control over the game. It is kind of what we have been waiting for. Again, like I've been Lamar Jackson guy on this show. I've been advocating at the altar of Lamar Jackson just needs a good offense around him. And this was the like this was the moment. It was like, if it's going to happen, it's got to happen now. It's got to, because if he doesn't do it in the playoffs, then we're back to square one with this narrative. But he looked composed, he looked cool, he was slinging it around the yard, and he just completely dominated the game. And honestly, I do feel like watching that game, I would have sworn he had way more passing yards. It's one of those games where it's like the efficiency hides, like makes you think the numbers were way higher than they were.
Yeah, it was an overall excellent showing by the Ravens. Like they had the definition of waking up and just getting back into the swing of things. Because
Right.
they were by far the best team going into the playoffs.
Oh yeah.
So it sucks that it was against the Texans for
Yes.
the
It is
story
objectively
that we had.
right. It is objectively a bummer that like maybe the most feel good team in the playoffs is the only team that really doesn't have a chance this week. Like every other game, there were a handful of moments where you're like, oh, this score might bounce the other way. Not this one, starting in the second half.
Yeah. It was like halftime hit, and then it just became the Lamar show, basically.
Right. And on defense, again, they were like, it wasn't a particularly sexy defensive showing, but it was a dominant. Like the Texans weren't turning the ball over. They weren't getting sacked a lot. They just couldn't get anything going. Again, I feel like, I mean, it shocks me how underrated the Ravens defense still kind of feels compared to like the 49ers and, the Browns this year and even the Chiefs. Like Roquan Smith is a freak.
He's
like,
a freak. Patrick Queen
Travis Kelce
is underrated too.
Yes. Even Jadeveon Clowney, who like I've always argued is actually kind of good, and if it wasn't for that one highlight where he almost murdered a Michigan running back, like people would respect his career a lot more. He's quietly been dominating this year. Like they have leaned into his strengths as like a very good like edge setter on the run game, if not like the 10 sack a year guy you would hope from number 1 overall pick. Like they've used him well. I maintain Kyle Hamilton might be one of the top 10 defensive players in the league already. Like it really was incredible where it's like, everything the Ravens did in the second half felt so effortless and fluid and chill. Whereas the Texans, it's like, man, how are they even going to get a yard? How are they going to get a first down? Like, and again, it's like it was an unsexy defensive performance because again, they didn't get a sack. There wasn't any fumbles. It was just pure like, you have no room to breathe. If you are not perfect on this drive, you're not going to get past the 50-yard line. And unfortunately for the Texans, that was what happened 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and it's literally the argument of, well, this sucks, but it's also like you're going against the top team.
Right. They had the ball in the second half for a grand total of 6 minutes, 7 minutes, a little over 9 minutes. Like
out of 30.
Truly. Yes, punt, downs on 4 plays, and then the end of the game where they got 17 yards.
Yeah.
Like, just, no momentum, no movement. That's just how stifling the defense was.
Yeah. And it kind of sucks, but I feel like it's a very well-earned win by the Ravens.
Oh, absolutely. It's a good vibe game it's a great vibe game for them going in because again, it's like all of this was fun and awesome, but they still had, the demon to beat of like, all right, can you guys do it in the playoffs though? Lamar at this point has 1 playoff win in 3 appearances. We don't count last year because he was hurt.
Last year.
But like,
He didn't
Right.
play.
It was kind of do or die time, or else the narrative really would start sinking in.
Mm-hmm. No,
Um,
it it must. I mean, obviously, it feels good to be a Raven right now, but it's like this is
mhm.
like that's one of those moments where you go back into the locker room and everyone's just kind of nodding, and it's just like, yeah, we're the fucking
Yeah,
Ravens.
yeah. Like no nonsense professionalism that you've come to
Mm-hmm.
expect with the best of the Ravens teams. And I'm just gonna say it. I think this is like the Ravens have won the Super Bowl 3 times or 2 times in their franchise's existence. Sorry, jumped the gun there a little bit. And I think this is the best team they've had by a pretty decent margin.
Yeah, no, this is solid. Like very.
Like the days of Trent Dilfer running the offense are over.
Yeah, no, and it's like you said, this wasn't like a just the like a defense heavy game. This was a very offensive game. And
Mhm.
if you look at it, actually, the Texans got more passing yards than the Ravens.
Really?
Yeah, so team stats: Texans
Oh, yeah, you're
got
right.
175, and then Ravens got 123. I mean, it's not a lot of it. It's like 50-yard difference, but it's still like, and then it shows when it's like rushing yards. Texans got 38, Ravens got 229. That's where it's
229 and 100 of them came. And this isn't like the classic Josh Allen. It's like, well, he had to do that because his running back got 3 yards a pop.
no,
No, no, Justice Hill got 66 yards, 5 yards a pop. Gus Edwards had 4 yards. Like, again, even Dalvin Cook, who was literally doing Jack and Diddley for the New York Jets, had just burst onto the scene for a 19-yard run and then kind of just got the ball a couple more times in like end of game time to run the
yeah,
clock. But like again, it's truly astonishing. It really is like a testament to like there are teams who make good running systems and there are teams who don't, where it's like I cannot remember a year since Lamar got there where the guy who was supposed to be the starting running back for the Baltimore Ravens was actually healthy.
hmm
Like how many times has J.K. Dobbins been out? Like how many times have their
yeah.
best laid plans fallen flat? And yet they just they're always producing like this. They're always producing at this level. And it really is just amazing of like, you know, for all the crap I gave Greg Roman for running like an archaic offense with Lamar Jackson, like they were still producing at this level, and
hmm
now it's just with like it's with the freaking gold mushroom
Mario
from
Kart.
Mario Kart because it's like oh yeah, but now people actually have to be afraid of the pass because you have like 3 wide receivers on the field at any given time who can actually catch the ball. Like everything's a credible threat now.
Yeah, and let's also not sleep on the fact that they've been playing for the last handful of weeks with their backup tight end,
Yes.
and their top tier tight end might be playing in the conference
Right.
game, which is insane.
Can I throw out one of my hotter take? I mean, it's not really a hot take at this point, but can I throw out a hot take?
Hit me.
I think Isaiah Likely. Not only do I think he's already a top 12 tight end in the league, I think he might just be better than Mark Andrews is at this point. Like,
Ooh.
I like Mark Andrews, and he's still good. Like, he was still good this year. Like, he was
Mm-hmm.
producing. But, like, Isaiah Likely, like, he consistently produces, 30 catches on 40 targets, incredibly efficient catch rate there, 411 yards, 5 touchdowns. Basically, the back half of the year where he was starting, it was like just going back to like the Rams game which was like his first big emergence game. 83 yards and a touchdown, 70 yards and a touchdown, 56 yards, 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then against Pittsburgh, when all the other starters were sitting, he still got a touchdown. He
Yeah.
was the only guy on the team to score. Like, guy's been producing all year. Someone said, like, he kind of feels like what we thought Kyle Pitts was going to be in terms of, like, freak athlete who just happens to play tight end because he's a little heavier set.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be honest, I'm like, you really shouldn't take him off the field when Mark Andrews comes back. Like, figure out a way to get
Uh,
them to both coexist.
yeah, I think that might be a key to it is because they're not just like finding them both on the field, but like rotating them, because I feel like tight end
Right.
isn't a position you like rotate out for
Not really.
like defensive linemen, kind of like a little bit of a revolving door where it's
Mm.
just like, all right, rest A and B, put in C and D, rest C and D, put in A and B, put in A and D, like all the combinations and stuff. But like tight end, you don't really get that, and I feel like I I agree. I think likely is probably, I don't know about top. What did you say? Top 12?
Yeah.
Um, I might not say top 12 off the top of my head without looking at a list of all of them, but I would say easily top 16. So top 50% of starters.
Mm.
But I think it's a situation like who was the backup for the Bengals after Burrow?
Um,
Was it Bagnett?
Tyler Bagent.
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 Um,
Good lord.
he said in an interview, he's like, I believe I'm a top 32 quarterback. However, I'm behind a top 5 quarterback. And I think that's the
Mm.
situation with Likely and Andrews. I don't think Likely's as good as Andrews yet, but I don't think he's not out of the talk of like starting for like good enough to be considered a starter for a good team.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like really impressive for them because like again, I talked about this. Like Lamar Jackson wasn't their first round pick that year. They got Hayden
Correct.
Hurst. Like they've been trying to get like a successor to Mark Andrews. They've decided the tight end position is like a position of import for them. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like they already let Hayden Hurst go, but they hit it out of the park on attempt number 2 with Isaiah Likely.
Yes,
So basically
absolutely.
it genuinely would be like if the Chiefs somehow got Dalton Kincaid this year, or like somehow finagled their way to trade up to get Brock Bowers, and it's
Yeah.
like you can't, not another you're not allowed to have this position be all pro level for 2 decades.
Oh, absolutely. No, they've 100% like I think they found the perfect replacement for Mark Andrews with Likely,
Mhm.
and it would be a matter of timing of when Andrews is kind of past his prime. I would say he's still in his prime right now, personally. But
Mhm.
this injury definitely took a hit to his prime time. That sped up the clock a lot, in my opinion. Um,
Indeed.
but it's a matter like so it's like finding that right time to get rid of Andrews, but not and maintain Likely is that window is a very narrow window, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Because as of right now, once again, haven't seen him play since his injury. His what was it? Was he an ACL or MCL,
Um,
or was it just like uh, what did he?
Andrews?
Yeah. Why am I thinking
I
he
think
was?
he broke his hand.
Why did I think
Yeah,
he?
there's no way he'd come back that quickly from he couldn't come back from a knee that fast. No, he broke a bone.
Um.
Hold on, let me double check. I don't want to
Yeah.
mischaracterize the injury.
I don't. There were so
Um,
many ACL and MCL injuries that it's just in my head.
right, but yeah, no, it was. Let me just pull up. I have it right here. I am a bit slow
Just
on
ankle. It was an ankle
phone.
injury.
Oh yeah, he broke a bone in his ankle. Eesh.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he can come back from it this fast. Honestly.
Yeah. I was right about the leg part. I was wrong about what it was, but I was right about the leg.
Both
Um.
of us had it half right.
Yeah. But yeah. Crap. What was I saying before we talked about that? Oh yeah. No, haven't seen him play since he broke his ankle, and before that he could have. He's one of those people that I believe could have just. He had his choice of, I would say, all but the teams with the out the top 5 tight ends, and he could have had the
Mhm.
starting gig. So
Right,
it's
right.
like he's still very good. It's just a matter of what you do with it. And excuse me, because like if you look at what happened, like for an example, like look at with like Peyton Manning and him leaving Indianapolis, because he was like pretty much past what would be considered peak Peyton Manning, but then kicked ass with the Broncos. So,
Right. Right.
so kind of a dead option in my opinion from that, but it's like trying to find that window, and the Colts really haven't been able to truly recover until somewhat this last season to be like
Mhm.
have a build to be a long term competitor.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's fair. Shall we? Shall we let you have your day in the sun with your bestie?
Yeah, because there's not a lot of games this week, so we're talking about just other things that happened in the world of NFL.
Right. Right.
And Jason Kelsey partied with Bills Mafia. He was at the tailgates. He's taking bowling ball shots and all that stuff, and then he went to the Chiefs family booth, and dude surrounded by his wife, his mother, Andy Reid's wife, Taylor Swift, the works, and he's pounding beers and taking his shirt off, jumping out in and out of the window for the booth.
I didn't know that part until the 11th hour. That's actually insane.
Oh, it's
That he wasn't
yeah,
because the fans are right there. It's a pretty compact stadium. There's not there's not too high elevated booths.
yeah.
I genuinely can't believe he was allowed to do that. I mean, I guess
I
if someone starts doing it, you can't really stop.
yeah.
Like, there's very little getting in the way of
It's
stopping the situation when it happens. He's like 335 pounds and like
yeah,
6'4", but
and
and
it
blackout drunk.
yeah, piss drunk. And it's also the factor of he's such a huge name, like he can get away with it. Like if the Eagles guard, who's possibly going to be his replacement, Cam Jurgens did that, people would be like, "What are you?" It's like, what is he
Right?
doing?
Like,
Like,
who's gonna like throw anything at him? Who's gonna start a fight with him? Like,
no
they're
one's
not.
gonna do
No
it.
one's about that life.
No one's gonna do anything. He might be like reprimanded by security, but it's like Jason Kelsey made a couple multi-million-dollar albums, for charity. Did
Nonsense.
this, did that, like, and all this, like
Nonsense.
the mummer
Utter
guy,
nonsense.
and it's just like everyone's just like, yep, well, that's the thing.
Yeah, just one, I just love someone mentioned a comment he made around like after they won the Super Bowl of like, I believe he was in a mummer's outfit, right? That
Yes,
was the whole thing.
he was in a
And
mummer's
someone was
outfit.
just like, "How many beers did you have and how relatively drunk compared to how you've
Yes,
been before were you?" And he said like, what did he say? Around 25
he
at
had like
that point and
20,
maybe
25
50%.
beers, and he was at a 5 out of 10.
And I'm just like, Christ,
My
man, they're just
man.
built different. Like, I cannot fathom metabolisms on that. Like, their body metabolizes things at rates inconceivable.
I
Like,
need to get my body
I'm here,
built like an offensive lineman, is what I'm hearing.
like, I'm a single fucking solar panel, and that man is splitting the atom
Yeah,
to create energy for an entire country.
yeah.
Holy smokes.
um, and he planned to take his shirt off and jump out the window from the beginning. He said it on the New Heights podcast, which him and Travis Kelsey host, where he's like,
I'll stomach it
I
eventually.
straight up told he straight up told his wife that he was gonna do that, and she said, "Don't," because it was also their first time meeting Taylor Swift, and he said, "I met you, our first date. I blacked out and I had to be carried home." I think so. It's like what it's like if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for her.
Well, that makes me feel better about a certain first date I had. Jeez, I didn't
Yeah,
have to be carried home.
he
I just
got
got lost
carried.
for a while.
He got carried home by Bo.
The
No,
fucking oh god, heaven! It just that for some reason, and like maybe this is a bleak comparison, but I'm just thinking about the Civil War comic from Marvel. That is like the actual comic isn't very good. Goliath gets killed, and he's stuck in giant mode, so they don't know what to do. Like
yes,
they're like, how do we bury him? And I'm just imagining that with like, how do we lift this man?
but
Where do we even begin? I
yeah,
guess he might have been a little
it's
smaller back then, but
yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's like, well, first off, disagree. Civil War comic was actually, I loved it. Um,
I don't know. I'm never. I don't know. I'm never a big fan of the Marvel event comics. They're
But
just. I don't know. Like I really never found one I've liked. It's always, and I like individual comics. It's always just the events for some reason where I'm like,
fair. But no, it's like a. I feel like we're more prepared for it now because of Andre the Giant. Because
I
that
can't even.
dude would travel
That's an
around the world and
inconceivable thought.
pass out in random lobbies of like in France and stuff, and no one could do anything about it. Now at least the world in terms of weight, I guess, especially America, is catching up to him or caught up to him, and
Right.
it's a lot more conceivable to be like, oh, like Andre the Giant being 500 plus pounds, um, when he passed out.
Right. The range of athleticism is just completely
It's
different.
yeah, 500, roughly 520, 7'4". So it's like pretty big, but like there's people now that are like 300 plus pounds and 3 feet shorter than him, or like 2 feet shorter than him, and it's
Right.
just like people we're more prepared for like more dense people.
Yeah. I mean, look. At the end of the day, we'll talk about the Bills game and we'll talk about the Chiefs, and
Yeah,
I'll just get it over with. But like, look, Jason Kelsey is an Ohio boy. He shares an eternal bond with the city of Buffalo
they talked about that
as
on
an Erie fella.
they mentioned
And
that on the
what
podcast.
yeah. What left the Erie can always return to the Erie, as they say. As to paraphrase Percy Jackson. Um and he returned and immediately got into character. God, I no, he wouldn't have been allowed to jump through tape. On the chance that he decides to
He
come
wanted
back,
to.
there is no way. I have to assume there's some kind of like player insurance that would have gotten him in trouble for that.
Straight up, he said it in the podcast. He wanted to jump through a table, but he couldn't find any. Like there was no spot that was doing it.
I mean, shit, Naheem Hines missed the entire season because of a jet ski incident, and we were
Yeah.
like debating whether or not he's getting his contract because of like stipulations. Which I'm like, just pay him, don't jinx the team. Like, I'm still reasonably certain the Lions were cursed for like 5 years because they refused to give Calvin Johnson his ding dang signing bonus. But I digress. But yes, that was a high in a weekend for me that did not have a lot of highs.
Mm-hmm.
Although speaking of, oh sorry, did you have one more point you wanted to make?
Nope.
Speaking of our don't sleep on games, you have the floor with Green Bay and San Francisco.
That was a great game. First of all,
Yes, honestly, of all the games, it was probably my favorite. It was actually excessively entertaining.
it was
Um,
down to the wire.
right. The 49ers ended up winning 24-21. Christian McCaffrey had 2 late touchdowns that finally gave them the lead over Green Bay, who were kind of in control of the majority of the game.
Yes.
Like, even at the beginning of the game, when it was 6-7 in favor of San Francisco, there was just a feeling of like, oh my God, is what is about to happen going to
That
happen?
yeah, the first half ended 6-7 in San Francisco, but that a 1 point game like that is not a comfortable
Right. It
spot
just
for
felt like
either
the
team.
Packers. Right. It just kind of felt like the Packers were in control of the game. They were moving it
Hmm.
downfield with efficiency. Jordan Love once again was just slinging the heck out of the ball,
Yeah.
like utterly impressive. Like you realized pretty quickly it's like right, the strengths of the Green Bay Packers are weaknesses of the 49ers. They're weak to like the middle of the field, they're weak to stretch plays, and they're weak to running. And Green Bay was just capitalizing on that in spades.
Hmm.
And the 49ers just really struggled this entire game. Like, again, I kind of grown tired of the Brock Purdy discourse, but like
Yeah.
Hachi Machi, he was very bad in this. Like, cartoonishly bad because, as
He
it turns out, the boy can't throw in the rain.
yeah, he was 23 for 39, 252 yards, 1 TD.
Right. And like I would argue those numbers don't do justice to how rough because he did have a final good drive where they kind of put it together and they were able to march downfield and McCaffrey was able to clutch up. Um, But before that, there's an incredible highlight where he drops back, takes the ball out of his throwing hand to try to dry his hand on his pants. Never mind that he's been in the rain the whole
Yeah.
and then just throws a duck. There were 5 or 6 passes where I sincerely could not figure out where he was trying to throw it to. Like, just straight up, like, twirling ducks. And I'm just like...
He was playing,
again,
like, the role of man of mystery.
It was a mystery because I'm like, it can't be this hard for you to throw in the rain, right? Are you, like, under the weather? Is it, like... Because this Packers defense has been their weakness for the entire year. They actually did just fire their defensive coordinator.
Yes.
That was a piece we got this morning. And it was just truly baffling, especially because, and like, again, I think I mentioned this last week, in terms of like the difference between a first round pick and like a later round pick at quarterback is always the physical trait. Like, again, people were like, why didn't Prescott go higher? Why didn't Brock Purdy go higher? And it's like, because they have a somewhat limited physical ceiling. Like, the guys with the best physical ceilings always go in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah,
and
like
you saw
Trevor
that with
Lawrence.
Jordan Love. Woo! With Trevor Lawrence, like, again, Justin Fields, his career is not really working out, but if you could do it again, he would get a first round pick grade because again, he clearly has the physical tools, and you saw that with Jordan Love, where it's like this rain is not affecting him at all. He is forcing the ball downfield, he is pushing it, he is setting the tempo. Like, the rain didn't bother him anyway. Unfortunately for them, that sort of madcap gunslinger attitude kind of did come back to bite them in the butt because the Packers miss a field goals win games.
Absolutely.
The 49ers take the lead, and it's like, okay, they can still do this. I do love some of the quotes that came out from the coach about like their angst about the kicker beforehand, who just really had a bad year. Missed more field goals than anyone. It just truly, I feel bad. But yeah, they don't get a chance to try and kick the game-time field goal because Jordan Love does it across body, sling across field.
Yeah. He threw the most bogus pass.
Yes, it was a Brett Favre special. Yeah. I love that people could pinpoint the specific play from the the Brett Favre-led Vikings that looked exactly like it, where he's like off his back foot, complete across his body throw, just into traffic, and the inevitable happened. And it was a bummer because, again, he was playing really well up until then. He was, like, arguably the best player on the field.
Before we dive into it more, when we talk about the lows, let's talk about your Don't Sleep on game. Because you chose something different.
Yes, the Detroit Lions beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by a score of 31-23. It was an interesting game because, like, nominally it was close the entire game. But, like, they really opened it up in the fourth quarter. Again, we have to give Jared Goff his flowers. He was incredibly efficient this game.
Yes.
287 yards and 2 touchdowns. The running game for the Lions is so overwhelming. Like, I cannot believe people clowned on them for drafting Jahmyr Gibbs. He is simply so fast, I just don't know what you're supposed to do against him. He ended up having 74 yards on 9 carries and 40 receiving yards.
Yeah, that was, like, interesting, because it was, like, I mean, in my opinion, I thought it was an interesting acquire, because they also picked up Montgomery, too, when they picked up Jahmyr Gibbs.
Right.
And it's just like, what are you guys up to?
Well, yeah, everyone questioned it, and I'm like, no, they're kind of, like, the perfect team for reaching for a first-round running back, because what do we always say about the problem with first-round running backs is always they have a limited shelf life, and it's like, well, we don't need them to play for 10 years. Our window is right now. We need them to be very, very good for, like, 3 years.
Yeah,
and that's exactly
really
what we're seeing
rookie
here.
Contract, and then after that,
you can worry about the rest later. And that was the case here, where it's like, how is anyone going to catch him? Like, I don't even think the Buccaneers played that bad. Like, they did kind of enough on defense to win the game, but he just was blowing people out of his shoes. Meanwhile, yeah, like I said, I don't even think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really played badly, which is the impressive thing. Like, Baker Mayfield, his stat line's not going to look the prettiest. 349 yards, but 2 picks. He did throw 3 touchdowns. And I just, like, honestly, I was impressed. This was a game where they had everything stacked against them, but still were at least keeping it competitive. Like, they only ended up losing by 8 points. They had a chance to go up until he threw the game-losing interception. But Yeah, honestly, just impressive display from both teams, and it's just a special, like it's kind of a unique game because Jared Goff joins a very exclusive club of quarterbacks to. I'm trying to pull up the list now. Oh, here it is. Oh, wait, no, that's not it. There is a very unique list of guys who have brought their teams to two different teams to conference title games.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Tom Brady, who won a Super Bowl with both the Patriots and the Buccaneers.
Correct.
Peyton Manning, who ended up winning a Super Bowl with both the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos.
Correct.
Kurt Warner, who ended up winning a Super Bowl with the St. Louis Rams, but did not win one with the Arizona Cardinals. Sorry, stop. Where the hell did I put this list? There's like one or two others I always forget. Almost there. I believe Brett Favre was one. He ended up going to the conference game with the Minnesota Vikings, but did not get there. Jared Goff joins that group. It is a pretty exclusive group to be in, and regardless of what happens, like
that's a hot group
what a
to be
turnaround
in.
for right. What a turnaround for him. Hold on, let me make sure I'm not missing anyone.
Yeah, like regardless of who else gets added, it's a very hot group, and Goff almost seems like an outlier a little bit, if you ask me. Like,
yeah, all of the other ones are unambiguous. That was the whole list. Like kind of unambiguous Hall of Famers, right?
Yeah.
Like Tom, Brett, Payton are already in, and is Kurt Warner in yet?
I think so. Is Tom Brady in yet? I thought he.
No, I don't.
No,
I mean, I guess I like memory hold that he will be in.
Oh, he's like he's guaranteed the second he's eligible. I just don't think he's reached that point.
Right. Yeah. No, he's got like I think he has 4 more years before he's eligible.
I
actually don't think Kurt Warner's in the Hall of Fame.
I think it's 2027 for some reason. That seems right to me.
Oh no, he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Yeah, and like Jared Goff is kind of considered like, he was kind of considered forgotten. He was like, the guy who came before Matthew Stafford to get to the the guy who blew the Super Bowl for the Rams. And now he's looking at a very real possibility, especially because like the 49ers team showed some vulnerabilities. And fittingly enough, the Lions defense capitalizes on all of those weaknesses.
Yes. No, they have a very strong defense. And I think what's going to matter the most, honestly, it's going to be should be a close game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is going to be, because it's got like the Lions defense exceeds where the 49ers offense faults, and then the 49ers defense has the ability to make these long runs that these people typically go on short.
Mm-hmm.
So, did they play this season at all?
No, I do not believe they have. I believe these are both original matchups for the conference finals, which is fun because
I like that.
We had a couple rematches in the earlier rounds. It's nice to have some like fresh content for the people.
Yeah.
Truly, not know what to expect.
Mm-hmm. Although I will say, actually no, I'll save it for when we talk about. And no, I'll say it now. There is a non-zero chance that it's a Lions-Chiefs Super Bowl. That was the first game of the year.
Yes, that was the famous Kadarius Toney actively cost the team the game. Yeah. Like really, really weird opening night game. Yeah, it is interesting.
That was when the Lions were just like, "Hey, we're a real team this year."
Right. That was when all of this was still in theory, where it's like, are we putting too much stock in the Lions? Like, do we, is this going to be the classic darling team doesn't have what it takes to actually win?
No, it was.
And then it turns out, no, they did.
Yeah.
They were good. We could also see a Ravens-Lions rematch. Unfortunately, the Lions got creamed in that game. So I'd like to think that if they have a rematch, it'll go a little better, but we'll see. And then I don't think the 49ers have played any of these teams before, come to think of it. Did they? No, wait, the Ravens also creamed them. Shoot.
Yeah, man, Ravens played 49ers on Christmas because I was listening to it in the car, and it was good. But
right. So NFC is really going to have to, if the Ravens get through, the NFC is really going to have to figure some stuff out.
Yeah, but it's also different now because it matters more. Like
Mhm.
Ravens 49ers, it was late in the season. Ravens were 12-3, became 12-3. San Fran became 11-4. That's kind of still guaranteeing you're gonna be playoff bound minimum. And
Mhm.
with everyone that's in competition with the 49ers falling apart left and right, not a terrible thing.
Right.
And then the Lions lost. They were both teams became 5-2 because of it. And oh my God, Jared Goff's throw stat for that game: 33 for 53. Um, yikes! But it's like they've also significantly gotten their shit together since then
Mhm.
because they were on a heater for the majority of the second half of the season, I believe. Um, yeah, they lost to they they're they only lost two. Yeah, they lost Thanksgiving, and then they lost to the Bears a couple weeks later, and then there was that 1 point loss to the Cowboys, which is skeptical at best. If
Right.
that's
I
truly a
mean, karma
loss.
really did work out to give the line. I mean, that's kind of the nice
Yeah,
thing about the Cowboys completely pooping their pants is it karmatically balanced it out, so the Lions still got home field advantage until they had to play the 49ers.
yeah, which that would have happened anyway. Um,
Right, right.
but all of their losses like have been either close or there's been some sort of like catastrophic failure. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes.
Right, right. Shall we move on to the eliminated teams and talk
Yes.
about what's they're looking at going into the offseason or what went wrong?
Yep.
So the Houston Texans, as you put it, the superior team won and injuries caught up.
Yeah. It was obvious from the start of playoffs. The Ravens were the hottest team going in. Like
Right.
both both sides of both conferences, but the Ravens were the hottest team.
Hmm.
And the Texans kind of like they were being thrown to the pack of wolves that have been killing it all year, and they've already exceeded the expectations that they were supposed to have for the season by making it to the divisional round in general.
Right.
Which with a rookie coach and rookie um, QB, and I think it was part of like because they lost some pretty key players with like Tank Dell and stuff, and I think all that was just catching up because they weren't expecting to play so long, probably. That it just everything caught up with them, and it's just like, oh, like we just wanted to be a better team than last year, which wasn't hard to do, and then it's just like we're actually on a heater and doing good, and then it's just like maybe we should have maybe we should have planned a little bit heavier for like a long term and had some a little bit more depth.
Right. That
Uh
is kind of the point I wanted to make,
yeah.
honestly. Like, I think my big takeaway is they got to be incredibly proud of the season, and it's got to be a like sigh of relief where it's like we
Uh,
got the pick right, we got the guy for basically the first time in this franchise's short history. We got the guy
yeah.
unambiguously, emphatically. Like, I'm pretty sure he's already won as many playoff games as Deshaun Watson. I would have to double check, but it's already closer than it should have been. My big thing is just don't get complacent because like the one problem that teams who are like in rebuild modes fall into when they like luck out into the star quarterback early is being like, oh, well, we already got the guy. He's already getting us 10 wins. Like, we don't have to sweat too much. And it's like, that's how you get into a trap like the Chargers, where you don't really improve your wide receiver group. It takes you forever to get the offensive line established. And, you know, like you lack the urgency you should have. Like, as incredible as the Texans have been this year, there are certainly holes on the team.
Mhm.
Like, we love Tank Dell, but Tank
Yes.
Dell is small. He's probably going to have, like the sort of weight range NFL players can play on is changed, but you have to accept small guys like that probably are going to miss 3 or 4 games a year.
Yeah.
Nico Collins was great this year, but at the same time, it's like this is his first good year. Can we rely on that consistently? Dalton Schultz is good, but he's getting older. Um, Particularly, also like the running back group, just really didn't have it this year. I like Devin Singletary. I feel bad like how it went down in Buffalo, but like he's not a top flight option. He's like a mid tier option.
Yeah.
Like they've never really been able to get the running game going, and that also ties in with like
That
it's
ties
really
in with their
important
loss
to
too. We talked about how bad they lost because of their runs.
right. They had no rhythm. They couldn't control the ball. Like they literally, it's like, well, if one of these passes is incomplete, that's basically it for the drive.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the offensive line injuries, it's like really critical to figure out like a 5-man group who can stay relatively healthy for the year. Like for them, it's like this is a motivation to not sit on your laurels, not be like, oh, we can just run this back and it'll be the same. Like I do think there's a chance for regression next year, and that'll be normal because again, like a lot of really good role players overperformed around CJ Stroud,
Yeah.
and it's going to come down to like how do we get guys who aren't we need to bring in as many non-role players as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Like comparing it to the Jaguars, their now direct rival, the biggest problem with the Jaguars is they settled for role players. They overspent on like the Evan Ingrams. They overspent on they overspent on Zay Flowers and like it helped them get to the playoffs, but it's not going to be enough for them to compete with the other big dogs in the league.
Yeah. No, it's they made it easy but tough for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
which awesome.
Yeah, you should be punching above your
Yeah.
weight class. It's just like, well, you need to get that weight on eventually because one of these days you're going to get hit really hard in the jaw.
Yeah, but they made themselves look like to be a very good team. Like I think I think they have another level of marketing instead of being like with this how this season went of like end of last season nobody wanted to be
Mhm.
associated with them. Not even Lovey
Right.
Smith. Um yeah, but like this season it's like, oh, there's these guys had a very quick 1 year turnaround
Mhm.
and they held their own against some of the best teams in the league.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
like if I'm looking to move and some higher tier players might be able to get a really good contract out of them for like a season or two because they're not wasting so much money on Deshaun Watson.
Right. What a.
What a bust.
It's
It just
right.
builds every single week how big of a bust of a trade that was.
Right. It truly. It's like the reverse Russell Wilson. I mean, I guess it's basically the Russell Wilson if you're from the Browns' perspective, but it really is insane. Like a franchise historical for not having any kind of organization or decision making skills. Not only did they dodge a bullet, the bullet went past them, hit a ATM machine, and just started shooting money out at them
Yeah.
because something malfunctioned in the machine. Um, but yeah, and like we were saying, it's like, you know, like use this as motivation to take the next 2 years of building very seriously. Like you
Yes.
have a great window here where you
Oh
can be the
yeah.
best team in the AFC before you really have to hang people.
Yeah.
Like really lock in and celebrate that you got the hard part done first.
Yes.
Like this isn't like the Lions where they had to go through a couple really rough years of like, all right, we're getting Penny, we're building up the figuring out the running back situation, we're building up the defense, and we'll get Jared Goff locked in. Like
Yes.
it isn't like the Eagles who had to go through like those like slummy back end Carson Wentz years.
Yeah.
Like the first piece, like the most important piece you already have. Now you just have to hustle a little more than you probably were thinking you did to get all the other
Yeah.
pieces.
And something they've already done with the last draft is they asked C.J. Stroud who he wanted to work with, and that's how he got Tank Dell drafted in the third round because he liked Tank Dell. And I think on the offensive side of the wall, build around C.J., see if he's got, see if how he feels about like upcoming rookies and stuff like that. And then on the opposite side, reach out to Will Anderson Jr., who's a force to be reckoned with as a rookie, and just see who these young guys that theoretically 2 full years from now, they're going to be getting their re-upped contracts and maintaining their status as team leaders.
Right. I'm very much looking forward to what our sweet summer children have um, have in store for us.
Yep, we'll be keeping tabs on them all of next season too.
Yes. Green Bay, as you mentioned, what went wrong was honestly kind of just, I mean, I don't know. Definitely that last pass, it felt like it cost them a game they could win, but they also made a lot of mistakes that you can't when you're that big of an underdog.
Yeah.
Like, they went for it on fourth down and got a bad spot. They had 2 chances for pick sixes and didn't capitalize. A ball got deflected and picked off. But at the same time, that last pass kind of was emblematic
That
of,
was
like,
that
all
was
the
the
tiny
last
little
nail in the
mistakes.
coffin. Like
Right.
all the other little mistakes, fine, whatever. But that was the final nail in the coffin, because if they played it a little bit smarter, because I believe they also had like a timeout left and stuff to work with. They played it a little bit smarter. They could have gone to field goal range and at least took it to overtime, and then
Right.
at least there would have been a breath of air while
Right.
like the pre-overtime stuff happens and all that jazz. There would have been a second where they could just go, let's get our shit together. Like, we're not relying on trying to not waste our last time out. We're just gonna go out there and we're gonna make some brownies.
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny because, like, for me, in terms of, like, comparing the two young gunslingers left, they kind of have a lot of things settled in. They have to fix some things on the offensive line,
Yeah.
but the running back set, their wide receiver position is set, which is so funny because of, like, how aggro Aaron Rodgers was about not getting any help. And it's like, all of these guys were drafted when you were here. You just didn't throw to them. You just didn't want them.
I want a full lineup of the of all the scores that the Green Bay Packers players have scored, like the receivers, because they've always felt like the most diverse group of scorers.
Right. Yeah. Like, I think the difference between the Texans and, like, the Packers here is it's less people punching above their weight class and more like guys who had upside in the later rounds kind of meeting those upside expectations. I don't know if I'm wording that the most correct, but it's a lot of, like,
that's a solid
second. It's kind of like all these guys in, like, the second, third, fourth round who it's like, oh, this guy has a specific role that could be very, very useful for a team. Kind of meeting those expectations. On top of, like, again, you have Aaron Jones, who is one of the more reliable pass-catching running backs that kind of simplifies everything. And you're right. It is, like, the wealth was passed around a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I really like Luke Musgrave. Another, again, banger year for rookie tight ends.
Rookie tight end. Great job. Same with Tucker Kraft.
Right.
Rookie tight end.
Like, absolutely unprecedented year for, like, tight end rookie success. Again, you're not supposed to be good as a rookie tight end.
No.
That's why, like, there are 2 guys who have gotten over 1,000 yards as rookie tight ends. And it's Kyle Pitts, which is hilarious when you think about it, and Mike freaking Ditka.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, for me, their biggest thing is just, like, they have spent a lot of picks on defense, and the defense just hasn't produced at the level. Again, it's the Bills' problem where it's like, how many picks did we spend on defense, and why is the defense not better? But, like, I'm really glad that they had the self-awareness to be like, all right, we're moving on from our defensive coordinator because, like, if the talent's there, the first thing, like, if we spent the resources, the first thing that needs to go is the coordinator. And then if changing the coordinator with all this talent doesn't work, then we start having the really difficult questions. And yeah, I feel like this team is super energized. Like, whereas I could see a little regression from the Texans next year, I feel like the Packers are going to have a much better record next year. Especially because, like, I love Matt LaFleur talking about, like, people in the room were just like, yeah, Matt LaFleur's excited because we're finally going to get to see his offense. It can't be
Yes.
overstated enough how much it was the Green Bay Aaron Rodgers is, where it was just like, oh, yeah, this play's nice, but I kind of don't like it, so I'm just going to audible it with like 2 seconds before the ball snapped and do my own thing. But it's
Yeah.
like, no, now it's actually an offense where every piece gets to shine.
No, and it showed that it was like with how well like and how diverse the throws are. Like we keep going back to it because it's like think about that. Like you're playing against the Chiefs. You gotta cover Kelsey. Everyone else is
Mm-hmm.
gonna be like option 2 or 3. But if we make Mahomes start struggling, he's gonna find Kelsey, and like that's his guy. And the Packers, there was a whole slew of them. Like
Right.
that, it just kept it so up in the air of who was gonna be Jordan Love's guy that you couldn't lighten up on anybody. And that was a very good sign, and that's something you like to see.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Yeah, and yeah, I'm very excited for this team. Like again, it's so nice to have two teams in the NFL who are driven by youth and driven by like as we're in this transitional period for the NFL in terms of like
Yeah, we're at the
the old
end.
guard passing the torch.
Yes.
It's so nice to have two locked in like these are teams you're going to be seeing.
Yes, like I think so. Like the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady era, like Ben Roethlisberger, like the longevity quarterback era, like those golden years
Mm-hmm.
are clearly over now, and I think we're like in the silver years, but the bronze years quarterbacks are starting to rise up.
Correct. Shall we move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers?
Yeah, they
So
yeah.
I
I said that they really had no chance.
Yeah. Honestly, the fact that they made it this close is actually a huge achievement. Like, again, it wasn't like this game. It was
It
a
was
weird
not a
game where
bad
it's like,
game.
oh, the Lions got this. But at the same time, you keep looking, it's like, well, the score shouldn't still be tied, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was too
And
close for
then finally they
comfort,
open
but
up at the end.
I was not doubting the Lions at all this entire game.
Right. And for the Buccaneers, it's like a pleasant surprise year. Like, again, this was supposed to be a full on rebuild year. This was supposed to be the year where you have to make a difficult decision if it's better to trade Mike Evans and get picks. Like,
Yeah.
this was a year where you were talking about, like, all right, well, what quarterback do we want? What draft do we want? And Baker well performed over expectations. You
Yeah.
finally were able to have a vaguely competent offensive running game. Like, and the defense, people forget, is still like like a third of your defense is still guys who played in that Super Bowl. It hasn't been that long. It just feels longer
It
because those last
feels
couple Tom Brady seasons were a slog.
yeah.
Um,
It's interesting to like cuz it's you're not wrong. They are like at that weird point where it's just like it's still full of like the Super Bowl team,
mhm.
but it's like it doesn't feel like it because and it feels like it was forever ago.
Right.
So,
But we also weren't thinking of that team as a Super Bowl caliber team when it was Jameis Winston throwing 30
yes.
interceptions in a single year. Which I guess really is like how like sort of flippant these things can be. I
Mhm.
guess for me, it's like that kind of just raises a weird question of like, all right, but
Where
what
do
do you
you
do
go?
next?
Yes,
Right.
that's the weird question because it's like Baker Mayfield, like he's gonna. I think he's only on a one
He's
year.
earned another starting job.
Yeah, he's definitely earned the like a reasonable like. Hey, we can take you for another year, have you for 2 years,
Hmm.
and he clearly has earned that starting job with this team. But it's just like, do you want to start your rebuild now because NFC is a pretty solid
Right.
like there's some pretty tough competitors in that division or that conference. Um, Give me 1 second. I'm seeing who they play next year.
Right. it's interesting because yeah, it's like the rebuild is coming at some point for you guys. It's just maybe coming later than you think. Basically, it's like if you want it to start, you have to trigger it.
Yeah.
Like
Ooh.
like Baker Mayfield has earned a starting job, but you really want to commit to him personally being your starting quarterback
Yeah. All right.
when you're not 100% sure what the ceiling for that is.
So they play the NFC East, which has two real fighting teams and two other guys. I'll let you pick which ones are which. The AFC
Ouch.
West, so Broncos and Raiders kind of looking hot.
Yeah.
Chargers with
Some
their
script.
brand new college winning head coach,
Ooh.
and the Chiefs, which are the Kansas City Chiefs, their own division, whatever. And then the last three teams on that list of like kind of like the random teams they just throw in to fill time. You ready for this?
Hit me.
San Francisco 49ers, Baltimore Ravens,
Mm.
Detroit
Oh.
Lions.
Oh.
Three of the four remaining teams. Actually, they play all four remaining teams next year.
That's actually fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe those, if I'm remembering correctly, at least two of those are decided by where you placed in the division. So, like, if you're first in your division, you play first. You play someone who was first in their division from a
Yes.
different conference.
Yeah.
So, I believe that's how you get Lions and Ravens. I don't know how you get 49ers. I think there's some kind of like yeah, I
It's
don't understand how you get the 18th game. It's always confusing how they decide where you get that
yeah.
extra game from.
It's
But
like
like the other ones
placements
have
and
a
stuff.
system in place.
Yeah. I like to just call them monkey wrench teams. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's like so like with that schedule and based off of this year, how do you plan your off season? Do you plan to win
Right.
or do you plan to rebuild? Because Cowboys, Lions, 49ers, Ravens, Chiefs, Eagles are all very clearly built to have like having established teams and have the potential to still go hard.
Mhm.
Um, Broncos, Raiders, depending what the head coaching spot at Falcons happens with too, can't forget that. They got rid of Art, so they might actually use their
Mm.
receivers. Um, like those three
Um,
teams for 4 games is also another group of just like I don't think these are easy teams anymore.
right. It is like, do you position yourselves in the spot the Saints have for all these years, kicking their salary cap down the road, where it's like, hey, you know what? This division is kind of a cluster. Like,
Hmm.
it's a lot of moderately talented teams with a lot of question marks, and we believe we have slightly more talent than them. We can make the playoffs every year, and if we get into the playoffs, we can have a situation where, like this, where hey, one drive goes differently, and we're in the conference finals.
Yeah,
But or are you like, but is that worth it to you? Because it's like, you know, how many times can you depend on getting to play a Philadelphia Eagles team who is setting itself on fire? How many times,
yeah,
like how many times are the Detroit Lions going to let you stick around in that game for that long?
yeah. How
Like you
many
played them
times are
this
you gonna?
regular season and they
How many times are you gonna play the Cowboys early in the playoffs
right,
and then
right. Yeah, how many times are you going to have those bounces go your way that like rearrange things for you?
yeah,
Would it be better just to bite the bullet this offseason and start moving stuff, start moving on and accept that like okay, that's a hard sell for the fans,
hmm
but like, you know, it'll be worth it if we're better for it.
yeah. I think it's gonna. I think it would most depend on who coaches the Falcons. If they have a top tier
Oh,
coach, because I there's been some pretty big names looking at Atlanta, and you
right.
can't
It
lie,
seems
you can't deny it.
right.
Atlanta's like their
It's still a
roster's
pretty
pretty
yeah,
solid, and
right.
they have a very early pick, I believe, too.
Right. They have a top 10 pick, I believe, or top 12. Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I actually thought the job was, and we can talk about this when we talk about coaching hires and stuff, but I thought it was a more desirable job than the what's the word? Than the Chargers job.
Yeah,
Like
they have the
I,
eighth
I think
pick.
the Chargers one is perceived talent versus actual talent.
Yes.
Um, But at the same time, it's like, well, you have the quarterback for the Chargers, and you don't have the quarterback at the Falcons, and that's kind of been the whole damn problem here, hasn't it? But I'm like, I'd rather be in a place that's got like all the other stuff built, and I just got to find one guy who can move the ship around. But I digress.
Yeah.
But we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Let's talk. Do you want to talk about the Bills?
Do you want to just say your stuff, and then I'll get my stuff out of the way?
All
I
right.
have.
It is just another proof that field goals win games.
Mm-hmm.
End of statement.
Yeah, I mean, look. At the end of the day, that game is not Tyler Bass's fault. Like,
No, I don't
honestly,
think you should blame him.
Honestly, if I were the head coach, I would have identified that it's a windy day, that Tyler has been having struggles at the end of this year for some reason, and you should have like told Josh, "Hey, we are going to go for it on fourth down, no matter how many yards it is. So like, it's okay to take the check down." I'm not blaming Josh Allen for throwing that ball into the end zone on second down because the guy was wide open. He got hit as he threw, and it fell down. Again, the difference between honestly, the difference between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills is the Kansas City Chiefs have made good franchise decisions, and it has paid off with again, they have gotten blue chippers. Every draft, every signing, they've gotten blue chippers. Again, I look at this team and I'm like, they have Chris Jones, they have L'Jarius Sneed, they have Trent McDuffie, they found Isaiah Pacheco, they rebuilt their offensive line, they got Rashid Rice, and I'm like, when is the last time the Bills have had success with that? Truly, it came down to Chris Jones was able to make 2 defensive plays that changed the first and final drive for the Buffalo Bills. Our team with Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, Kyrie Elam, who the defense, who the coach has already given up on, we have spent all of these picks and gotten not a single actual difference maker on defense. I mean, I guess Rasul Douglas, but he had a bad knee this playoffs, so he wasn't really at full strength. That truly was the difference in this game, because otherwise it was back and forth. It really was the one they were supposed to, but they didn't, and I don't know, man. I just you know what it was? I read this just absolutely brutal piece that kind of sent me, because I get down this game. You've seen you saw how I was for the Cincinnati Bengals game.
I witnessed you this game too.
Yeah, I mean, because we happen to be playing D&D at the same time. I muted my mic for a chunk of it, fortunately. But, hold on, I'm pulling up, because it's a great piece, and it's really, actually emotionally devastating. But, yeah, it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of the time I've been I'm about to go on a whole tirade about the Bills. I'm going to rile at the heavens. But I always get tired out. And a part of it is because it's the same stuff every time, man. It's the same exact stuff that we've been saying for 3 years. And that's why it's so distressing to see, Brandon being our GM. We're going to be shopping at the same places. That's how we're going to do it. And knowing emphatically that Sean McDermott is coming back in this year where we have an unprecedented amount of great potential hires, who absolutely would fix the very specific problems that the Buffalo Bills have had over the years. It's knowing we knew the story in advance. People talked about that 9/11 art and were like, oh, this is a hit piece. They're trying to sabotage the season. It's no, he was just finally showing you the script. It's during Oscar season when the studios release digital copies of the scripts of their movies so you can actually read what's about. Of course it was going to come down to this, where Sean McDermott decides to have AJ Klein in the entire game despite him simply physically being unable to cover. Of course, it was going to come down to him making a stupid decision to fake a punt to Damar Hamlin. And I'm going to be very honest. I kind of want Damar to retire. Not because of anything he has done, but simply because this was the capper to this ghoulish, sort of miserable year where he's either been a scapegoat for what went wrong last year, or this attempt at rallying the troops and inspiring the troops, and basically a marketing ploy by the NFL. It's just been gross and miserable, and it's dude, you proved you could do this. Please, just go have a happy life where you're not going to be used as a puppet. It's almost as ghoulish as the NFL putting all of the end racism stuff up as they were blackballing Colin Kaepernick. But I digress. Of course, it was going to come down to Josh Allen feeling like he had to force it on his final 2 plays because he knew that his coach wasn't going to let him have the ball at the end of the game. and that if they didn't get 6, they weren't going to win the game. Of course, it comes down to, despite this Chiefs offense being just truly miserable entire year, just seemingly actively hating each other. Like, of course, they were going to average 7 yards of play, and that like they were going to, again, we had the ball for almost 15 minutes more, but we averaged 4 yards of play, and they averaged 9 because every receiver made at least one big play. Whereas we watched Stephon Diggs once again come up small. Like, I love the Philip Rivers to Josh Allen because it's like, no, it would be easier. All of this would be so much easier if it was just like Josh Allen, great regular season guy, terrible in the playoffs. No, he shows up every single playoffs. He has the lowest interception to touchdown ratio, or like the best touchdown to interception ratio of anyone who's thrown 20 touchdown passes in the playoffs. He shows up every year. He was damn near flawless again. A second playoffs where he's damn near flawless. And it just doesn't matter because everyone else shows up small all the time. Anyway, I just wanted to read this piece because this is kind of what sent me on the whole spiral. Buffalo has Josh Allen, who is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever grace the earth. And it just doesn't matter because the greatest quarterback of all time is his contemporary. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are not equals. Mahomes is better, just by little, but that little is more than enough. So history will remember the 6 straight AFC championship games that Mahomes has attended, and forget the few plays that kept a few of those games out of Josh Allen's grasp. Should I write about Allen's heroics? About a 60-yard detonation that hit Stephon Diggs in both hands, a 3rd and goal cross-body dot to Khalil Shakir in the front pylon, a rushing touchdown, and then another? Allen, careless with the ball all season, has no turnovers in his 2 postseason games. He had 4 touchdowns against the Steelers and 3 more against the Kansas City Chiefs. He didn't even take a sack against Kansas City. Buffalo punted twice. But what is here to say about Josh Allen's heroics that hasn't already been said in seasons past? I remember the will of Allen in the 42-36 loss in Kansas City, the 75-yard touchdown pass to Gabriel Davis to end the 3rd quarter, the 4th and 13 touchdown to pull ahead with 2 minutes remaining. I remember the 47 points against New England and the 2021 wildcard round, and the 52-yard touchdown run against the Steelers last week. I can't forget the great Josh Allen plays. Nobody can. But Mahomes' highlights serve as a bookmark in the story of his career. They're tethered not just to a place in time, but to a moment, an event, a victory. Allen's highlights are ghosts, ephemera. They are lost to the gales of a bombarded franchise, swallowed up by the shadow of an unforgiving scoreboard. They matter so much, they're the only thing that hope clings to in Buffalo, but they don't matter at all. And I think that's just the moment where I just hit peak, like, emotional exhaustion with this team, where it just really hit me of, like, he's not going to ever win MVP. There are just too many guys in front of him. He's probably not going to really get an All-Pro because there's too many guys in front of him. At this point, I think it's safe to say the window has closed on the Buffalo Bills. At least because if they're not willing to change their coaching staff now, they will not change it. And Terry Pegula is famous for not making changes when it's necessary. Lest we forget that the Buffalo Sabres have somehow managed to blow through bedrock and find something lower than rock bottom, and their head coach is still employed. He's too busy effectively stealing money from the state of New York. And side tangent, people who are like, oh, it's not you don't have ownership in the team even if you pay for the stadium. Actually, why the fuck not? If you're going to use my tax dollar, like, I can vote for my taxes to go to certain things. Why do I not have a say in this then? But I digress. And I just realized, like, there's a very real chance none of this means anything. That Josh Allen is just an interesting player in history. Larry Fitzgerald was absolutely incredible, but because he didn't win an MVP, because he never ended up winning the Super Bowl, he kind of just gets forgotten. Like, There's so many great players like that who just get forgotten. Like, if they don't get enough All-Pros, if they don't get an MVP, if they don't get awards, they're just interesting stories that are lost in the annals of time. And it just really hit me of, like, when was the last time I had fun watching this team? Like, when was I, like, really happy about the Bills season? Not about football. Like, clearly, I've been talking to you for football for about 2 hours a week for how many straight weeks? I clearly still like the sport in some way, shape, or form. I still enjoy it. I still love the stories. I still love the narratives. I still love the analytics and numbers and game of it all. But, like, as a Bills fan, when was the last time I enjoyed being a Bills fan? And I sincerely, like, maybe opening weekend against the Rams after 13 seconds, like, maybe the run up to that, like, the last 2 seasons have sucked. They've been miserable. They've been, like, just the weight and burden of it all has just constantly dragged me down because every single snap, every single play has been like a referendum on the last decade of my hobby, of like the stuff I like.
Hmm.
And I just really thought about it, especially because we were playing D&D while it was happening. And this is the second time that's happened because we also played D&D like when the 13 seconds game happened. And I just thought about it, and especially yesterday, or the other day, I almost turned the game off because I'm like, I'm having so much fun with D&D right now. I'd rather just like channel all of my energy into that because I know how this is going to end. Like, because I don't know how D&D is going to end.
Yeah.
I know how the Buffalo Bills season is going to end because it always ends like this, because that's how the story ends. And it just really did send me down a spiral of like, I don't love this team anymore. I really don't. Like, would them winning a Super Bowl even make me that happy? Like, people keep telling me like, one of these times the breaks will bounce your way. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like I'm a pretty religious person, but I don't really buy into the notion of, hey, just keep everything the same, and one of these times the bad thing that happened last time won't happen. It's happened 4 straight years. Again, all the people who are like, oh, don't worry, the defense won't be as injured next year. And it's like, well, one year it was Tre'Davious White, one year it was Von Miller, this year was Matt Milano and Tre'Davious White. So it seems like that's kind of a pattern that's going to keep happening, and we have no recourse to fix that. Like, I just looking over the salary cap, looking over like the changes we're going to have to make. I just like it just I don't even feel an emotional connection to so many of the players. Like, it's so funny. I even started thinking about like going back to those crap years where we just sucked, and like, we were putting on a brave face for J.P. Loshman or Trent Edwards or Kyle fucking Orden of all people, of E.J. Manuel, Ryan Fitzpatrick was fun at least.
Ryan
And
Fitzpatrick is a
then
riot.
finally Tyrod Taylor. Yeah, those were the good. Again, I thought about that team, and even though Ryan Fitzpatrick drove me up the fucking wall sometimes, I was like, God, I felt like I had such an emotional connection to all those players. Like, I enjoyed them so much. Marshawn Lynch is my favorite Buffalo Bill, even though 90% of the interesting stuff he did with his career was attached to the Seattle Seahawks. If he goes to the Hall of Fame, it will be as a Seattle Seahawk.
Yeah.
Like, Aaron Schobel, Kyle Williams, Lee Evans, like, Josh Allen could play for 15 more years and not have as many losses as all these guys had as Buffalo Bills. But I just like, it really is like, all those years I was like, man, if we could just get the quarterback, it would all come together. You guys are trying so hard, and you just have the disadvantage of the quarterback. And now that we have the quarterback and it just keeps failing over and over and over again, I just like, I hate that I don't like any of you now. Like, I hate that like my brain just turns into like, you are the guys keeping me from the thing I want. Like that, like, you guys are letting me down, when it's like, well, they're just as upset too, but now my brain can't process that because it's just, 4 years of hopes that we lost in 13 seconds just constantly in my head. And, the constant like narrative discourse of like, oh, how dare anyone compare Josh Allen to Patrick Mahomes? Like, how dare the Bills think they belong here? It just, all of the weight and like bloat and like stress of it all. I'm like, I don't know. It just, I'd like to think I'll be able to talk myself into rooting for the Bills and like caring. Like, I said I was done with the Sixers. I said, wake me up in round 2. But the difference between the Sixers and the Bills is they fired their coach and brought in a new coach, and the
Yeah.
vibes immediately turned around, and they feel like a different team having fun. Where Joel Embiid will score 70 points on Victor Wembanyama, seemingly just for no reason, just to prove a point, I guess. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I just like, it's tough to know like the last 5+ years of your hobby and maybe indefinitely didn't really mean anything. And even if you do win a Super Bowl, it will somehow be, it'll somehow be reframed as like, well, Patrick Mahomes did something wrong that year. But I digress.
I think that was well said. I think
Um,
kind of piggybacking off of it a little bit for a second. Josh
mhm,
Allen would be considered an elite level quarterback if he wasn't in the current era.
right. Anyway, in 1926, 22-year-old doctoral student J. Robert Oppenheimer grapples with anxiety and sickness while studying under experimental
I don't.
physicist Patrick Blackett and Cavendish Laboratory. And this
Wait,
is the
what's.
plot of Oppenheimer.
I know it is, but are you doing the outro when we still have more to talk about?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
I'm down. No, that was me just trying to segue to the next section. My God. And if you thought Barbie was an insane plot, this is just a plot with so many fucking names. I couldn't keep them all straight. I mean,
Yeah.
like I know these were all historical people, but at some point I just start calling him Robert Downey Jr. But anyway, so shall we move on to our notes?
Yes.
We do have a couple interesting hirings and firings.
Yes.
So the Titans picked their new coach. That's kind of the smaller one of this bunch. Um, they just signed Brian Callahan, the Bengals offensive coordinator, to the
Correct.
job. This was kind
Interesting
of like
choice.
this was kind of the one that people were scratching their heads on just because the pool was so robust for this year that like there's so many options. Um, it is interesting. Like I will give this guy credit because at the end of the day, he got left holding a pretty nasty bag this year. If like you had like 3 weeks
Hmm.
of functioning Joe Burrow and you still had a winning record and still a relatively functional offense. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, in terms of like glow ups, this offense went from 0 to 100 really fast. So I'm willing to give it a shot, and it
It's.
does feel like a nice restart for the franchise.
I think. I think they need to play some smart scheduling with off-season people, trying to get the most out of some talent. Like, I think you can. I think this is the year you can market Derrick Henry for a lot without people being too suspicious.
Hmm. Right,
But I think anything past, like, because he's clearly on a downward trend. Um, I think past this year, it'll be.
right. I would be surprised if he comes back.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I guess that's my big question. It's like, well, what does the offense look like? Are you truly starting from like scratch? Like,
Yeah.
do you still want Will Levis? Like, what are we
Oh, you got
working
to
with
keep
here?
Mr. Mayo. Um,
Ugh, yuck.
yeah,
Did
no,
he even actually end up doing that? I
I
have
don't
mixed
remember,
reports on that.
but it's just,
Yuck.
it's still funny.
Fucking
But
weirdo, man. I've warmed up to him. You know what? I will say, like, I was down on him in the draft process. I've warmed up to him. He played hard this year. He was
he
perfectly
showed up.
pleasant.
But that was just an interesting like acquisition because it's like
Hmm.
I can see how it makes sense. Bengals like offense have been pretty great over the years, and it's
Right.
just like huh, why is this the choice? And it's like part of me thinks it's because they have Bengals contracts are running up soon. A lot of
Right. I
important
don't blame
players.
him for getting
Oh
out
no,
of Dodge.
I don't blame him for getting the job, but I'm saying for like the picking him as Tennessee. Like a
Mhm.
lot of Bengals players contracts are up soon, and if they like that coach and
Oh,
Titans
ooh.
Titans might have a little bit of money in their pocket coming up.
Right. I was gonna say they've shed a lot of cap. They're actually in a rebuild, and it would be curious to see like, could you talk T. Higgins into coming for a
Yeah.
slightly overpriced contract?
Yeah,
Could you
you
talk?
can
Who could you talk into coming here?
you can make some words happen and you might be able to finagle something awesome. Um
Mhm.
Another team on the opposite end of the spectrum of having their coach pretty much established already. All right. I want you to guess how many interviews the Atlanta Falcons have had for their head coach spot.
I know Bill had two. Um, have they had? Shoot, I guess the question is, have they interviewed anyone else yet? I know they fired their defensive coordinator, which is like, oh, are you trying to like, because Bill would want to be the defensive coordinator too? I'm gonna say four.
Higher.
Really, seven?
Higher.
Jesus Christ! I mean, you can't spend too much money on this offense to fuck it up. 12,
Higher.
20.
They have interviewed 14 different coaches.
Jesus Christ! I don't know. I like.
I
I mean, I guess it's like a good pool of candidates this year. You want to do your diligence, I suppose.
mhm. I it's one of those things that it's just like hoof like
Mm.
if at what point do you start thinking it's the coach is going maybe I don't want this spot if you're interviewing 14 people like where how it's like how many things have to be worse going worse for you
Hmm.
like
Right? It's like you're. How indecisive are you guys? That's like all of this.
yeah and it's like One of the people was Bill Belichick, who I previously have said he has pretty much an open invite to whatever team he wants. And if he interviewed for the job and he wasn't the one that said no, if they were the ones that said no,
Mm.
you really got to start just thinking about it.
Right. I will say I do think I am curious. I am curious, like how many, like, because I could totally imagine like a lot of because like we're in the age of like the hot shot to have hand on. Like I can imagine a lot of them are like freezing up at Bill wanting. Because I can imagine Bill coming in and expecting to kind of say over the roster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Like, if I would, and I would at least consider carving out an eye if it would get the Bills Bill Belichick because I actually think every basically he is the polar opposite of Sean McDermott. Actively fixes. Um, I like obvious there, but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious. Like again, I think this is the more desirable job than the Chargers.
Yeah,
The Raiders signed Tom Telesco GM, and they're about to realize like just because he got a bunch of big names to come here does not mean their offense, their like they didn't have skill.
yeah,
You know. Um, Speaking of Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, after finally achieving what sound, I didn't realize how manic this man was about coming, like fulfilling some kind of prophecy. Uh,
yeah,
he is the Chargers head coach. I guess, like, if you're the Chargers, and it seems like a big part of the, like, not necessarily a curse, but a vibes thing. Like, we never seem to have the culture.
mm-hmm.
Why not get the aggro guy who finally beat Ohio State, finally got ship. Like
Yeah,
in terms of narrative, it tracks. I also just think it's funny because Justin Herbert is, by all accounts, a pretty chill, silly dude. Jim
yeah,
Harbaugh is the most corny, manic bitch. Like that guy was living during that championship, and I'm like, poor Justin's gonna have a heart attack within the first weeks.
yeah. It's gonna be interesting, and I'm not intentionally cutting you off. You cut out. Um,
No.
but yeah, no. There's a lot of like he was obviously a choice to be picked up as a head coach for some team easily,
Mm.
like offered a pro level position. So it's just kind of like a how is this gonna work? And then, um, yeah, the Rams or not the Rams. Sorry, the Panthers have been interviewing across the field. They've been head coachless the longest.
Yes, because they fired their coach early.
Yeah,
I
they
love
fired.
people are talking about the Bucks firing their head coach this early in the year, and it's like, what is the precedent for that? I'm like, well, Frank Wright's kind of close, but the difference is the Bucks are 30-13 and hadn't won a football game yet.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, and I fished my wish with the Eagles, where they fired both coordinators and Matt Patricia might not have been formally fired, but have been told they're not coming back.
Matt Patricia, perhaps the best nepo baby to actually not be related to Gordon. Um, Truly, getting by being friends with Bill Belichick.
Yeah. I'm really happy about that. And another pretty, in my opinion, pretty big news: Vic Fangio not coming back to the who the hell are they? The Dolphins.
Yes, genuinely shocking. And also, like, if there's one silver lining to this Bills season, it's kind of funny that like Dolphins fans were like, "Oh, it's so Jover for Josh Allen." Once Vic Fangio draws up some defenses, and it's like he's gone within a year, and
Yeah.
now he is presumably the Eagles, unless something happens.
It's
They're targeting him.
it through the rumor mills because I don't know anything for a fact, but it seems like they are what's it called? The Eagles are making the hardest push for him for their now open defensive coordinator position, and I don't hate it.
Mhm.
but
I he strikes me because like there were periods where the Dolphins defense was cooking. He very much strikes me as like a guy who succeeds when he has big name. Like he's a stars and scrubs kind of coach. And like,
mhm.
look, I know the defense wasn't very good this year, but they still have some stars.
I don't. I don't think it was a matter of the defense lacking. I think it was a matter of coaching.
Yeah, like I don't know. Again, the quarterbacks were old, the safeties
Well,
were wasn't
yeah,
addressed, but at the same
I
time,
was thinking exclusively defensive line. I'm gonna be
yeah.
real.
Well, that yeah, mainly defensive line, but even then, it's like the team was not as bad as that spiral suggested.
Yeah,
It's a damning indictment of the coaches that they couldn't think of anything to slow that
that's
down.
that's the biggest aspect. Like their defensive backfield is clearly falling apart, and then the coaches were like, "What if we do the same thing that hasn't been working in weeks?"
Right.
And then they just they fold their hands together, and they go, "I like it." Um, yeah,
But just just talk around the press. That'll do it.
yep. Um,
I mean, I really did think Sirianni was done for. And
I I had faith he was going to return for the next season. However, next season, dude's going to be kept on like a 3 foot
oh, yeah,
leash. He is not going to
right.
be given any. I think last season gave him the slack for this season,
Hmm.
and this season does not give him the slack for much further. And depending how it goes for them, he might be one of those week like 15 firings.
Right. Yeah, I guess my stance on this general thing is like how high, like if you're an owner, you have to sit down and be like, what are the odds I'm gonna, like, if things go, how badly will things go next year that I fire this guy? And if you feel like there's even a chance you can fire him midseason, you should probably just pull the trigger earlier rather than later.
Yeah.
But that's not really how Lori likes to do things, and that's not how Terry Pagula likes to do things, as he steals money from the great state of New York, who, as New York City is getting budgeted out of libraries. But I digress.
Down boy.
Um, yeah, I know. I see. That's what I'll do to get back into the Buffalo Bills. Get very political, and then I'll do a whole, I'll do my whole Jack's lament and save Sandy clause. It'll be great. Um, anyway, so your question of the week of the eliminated teams this week: which two would have made the best Super Bowl or
Yep.
superb owl? I have a surprising
Yeah.
one for this.
So winding it back to back, same questions of the week because there's no real reason to not pick the same question.
Right. It's a fun question. Um, I'm going to say Bills Tampa Bay.
Interesting.
Because I think the narrative of like, Josh Allen being sort of like one of the faces of the league, being like, kind of being the upstart from that draft class. It is kind of wild that the only if you count Sam Darnold as the backup for the 49ers, literally all of the first round rookies except Josh Rosen were in the Elite 8 this year.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Rosen, who has fully been just shoved out of the league. I don't know what he's doing right now. They all somehow made it, and that's kind of funny because it's like out of all of these like sort of quote unquote elite quarterback classes, how many could have actually said that?
Yeah.
Like, certainly not. This year's draft class or the one with Mac Jones and co. Certainly not.
No.
This draft class only had one make the playoffs. It's interesting. But yeah, I think it would have been an interesting narrative of like, Josh, who kind of immediately became a star for his team, and Baker Mayfield, who is now on team 4, and yet
Yeah.
somehow, against all odds, is turning it around.
Yeah.
I also just have a funny memory because my dad was so stressed out during that draft because at the 11th hour, the night before the draft, there was some talk about Josh Allen being the favorite of the owner. And he's like, God damn it, they're going to draft him first, and we're going to get stuck with Baker Mayfield or Darnold, and it's going to suck. Because he was all in on Josh Allen. I remember that's one big memory I have, that he was very, very adamant of like, Josh Allen's the guy. He's the exact kind of quarterback we want.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I also just think it's a fun matchup because it's like, it would have been a huge shootout because the Bills defense, again, was kind of being held together by tape, and Mike Evans was going on a heater this playoffs. Like he was a man looking to like set his legacy up golden. Um, and the Bills would have been going against a relatively talented defense, but when they could beat, I think it would have been a fun shootout style game.
Hmm.
And would have been a legacy defining game for two highly touted draft prospects from the same class. We don't get a lot of opportunities like that.
No, we do not. Um, Words are hard in my brain. That
Um,
I don't.
yes, Josh Rosen was last on the Vikings
Yeah.
practice squad and was subsequently cut. So now he is nowhere.
Yeah. Whatever. Um,
What would your pick have been?
I would have honestly said like there's the bias of us, but it's I would have still said like even outside of the bias, Houston Green Bay. That would have been
Right.
a very young group,
Mm,
and it would have been very interesting to watch how that affects their careers.
right. Yeah, it would have been. It also just would have been a fun, like, kind of pitch to
Oh
the
yeah,
like NFL fan of like, hey, the future game. Like, it's the NFL futures already.
it really is. It's literally like a. It's like if during Pro Bowl week they had people that were on their initial contracts play.
Mhm.
Like you cannot have if you have more than your rookie contract, you are not allowed to play in the game. I feel like that'd be fun, but it would be two young teams going at it pretty hard. They like have weirdly deserved it, but not deserved being in.
Mm,
Like so it would have been like it would have been underdog versus underdog, not underdog versus big dog. Um,
right, right.
yeah, that would have been my team. Uh, shall we get into next week? Cause
Yes, we're
again,
at the end of the road, kind
yeah.
of.
So
So our
yeah, 3 games left total, not
yep.
including Pro Bowl.
Yes, so the AFC Championship game is on CBS at 3 o'clock. The Kansas City Chiefs playing the Baltimore Ravens, and then the nightcapper, 6:30 on Fox, is the Detroit Lions at the San Francisco 49ers. So I know last couple weeks we did upset watch. I guess like which game do you feel more strongly will end in an upset? Because we do have the two number one seeds in.
Yes.
I would like to hear your argument
I
for why one game might be an upset.
Ironically enough, it is. I believe it is both number 1 seeds versus number 3 seeds.
Really? Oh, right. Because I forgot. Fuck, Dallas was the number two seed. Whoops.
Yeah, Dallas
God,
was
that's
the
so
number two
funny.
seed, and then who was Bills were number 2 seed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I should be happy we went from the 11th seed to somehow jutting out of the pack, but you know,
Um. Yeah. So I want both lower. I would say the Lions over the 49ers would be my more of an upset kind of game.
yeah,
Uh,
that feels like the more likely one of the two.
yeah. Um. The way I'm looking at these 4 remaining teams is there's technically 4 different combinations,
Mm,
and there is a 25% chance that I won't care who wins. I would be excited just to enjoy the football game, and that's Lions Ravens.
mm,
There is a 25% chance that we have a day one rematch, which is something in the storytelling aspect of like professional wrestling storytelling aspect in my head
mm,
loves that
right.
of a rematch of the day one game. Then you have the um, really just kind of a dud game, in my opinion, of Chiefs 49ers, where if it's those two teams, I'm not 100% sure if I'll even watch. Like,
Yeah.
I really don't want to see the 49ers win, and like, since I'm not a Chiefs fan, it's just like, they're here almost every single year. Like,
Right.
is it worth my time? And I don't want to see the 49ers thrive. And then there's Ravens 49ers, which I would probably watch in hopes of the Ravens do it again,
Mhm.
win it again. And like, yeah, that last 25% is like a leaning towards the Ravens.
Right. In terms of like the possible upsets, I guess my argument for Kansas City at Baltimore, even though I feel like Detroit 49ers is the higher chance one, is just Patrick Mahomes has historically done well against the Ravens. It feels like Travis Kelce was committing workers' comp and taking it easy during the regular season. And again, they've somehow managed to foolproof the situation where they can have a catastrophic turnover like that ball that bounced into the end zone and
Yeah.
still survive. And again, like possibly the best unit still in the playoffs is the Kansas City defense. And if Spags can get the best of Lamar Jackson, then I could
Yeah.
easily see this being a surprising upset. In terms of matchups, I would love to see. Again, yeah, Baltimore Detroit would be my favorite. I guess I'd feel a little bad just because, like, I don't want Jared Goff to lose another Super Bowl. He doesn't deserve that.
He doesn't
But I
deserve
think
it,
that
but I think it would still be enjoyable.
right. Um, and I would love to see, I don't know, Baltimore 49ers, like, I don't know. I guess, like, the Brock Purdy discourse has just gotten so ridiculous. I just think it would be funny for it to all fall apart on the biggest possible stage.
Hmm.
Kansas City 49ers would at least be interesting on the grounds if that's the one matchup we haven't gotten yet.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's all three of the matchups, I believe.
Yeah. But
Oh, yeah, and Detroit, Kansas City, which I'm like, that'd kind of be fun to see if the Lions could pull it off again.
yeah, that would be just like a yeah, like I yeah, it's gonna be quite the set of games to see, and
I can't wait to get there.
yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. There's gonna be some good football.
All right. Shall I wrap it up for the audience?
Wrap it up.
Osage Nation elders bury a ceremonial pipe mourning their descendants' assimilation into white American society, wandering through their Oklahoma reservation during the annual flower moon phenomenon of Fields of Bloom. Several Osage find oil gushing from the ground. The tribe becomes wealthy as it retains mineral rights and member share oil lease revenues. The law requires white court appointed legal guardians to manage the money of full and half blood members, assuming them quote unquote incompetent. In 1919, Ernest Burkhart returns from World War I to live with his brother Byron and uncle William King Hale. Truly a great. I didn't know Robert De Niro still had that in him. That is so fucking evil. I cannot. You know what? I'm done with the bit. I'm just gonna say, if you have time, go and watch Killers of the Flower Moon. It's very depressing, but it's very well made. It's Martin Scorsese, possibly with his last movie, pausing and reflecting on how Hollywood was made on the Western genre and how it often played the importance of indigenous culture. It's based on true events that kind of normally, historically, if people tell the story, it's more about how this kind of helped form the FBI. But in reality, it's a much more rich, heartbreaking story than that. It's really, really good. Lily Gladstone will probably win Best Actress. And if she doesn't, people are going to be really mad about that. And yeah, it's good. Go see it. Great. Carter here. Carter, Kevin, explain football. Carter,
Kevin,
we forgot how to talk. Good night.